I want to rant for just a minute. I am really getting tired, or as we say here in the South, fed up with all the stories that I'm hearing about FDA approves this, FDA approves that, they don't approve this medicine. Come on. I've been practicing medicine for over 30 years, and we've been using medications for quote-unquote unapproved uses every day. Any doctor that is taking care of patients regularly knows that certain medications have FDA approval for certain indications. That means that when the pharmaceutical manufacturer tried to get the drug approved, that they asked for certain approval. But as clinicians, as physicians, we're able to use those medications for uses for other things. It's not cheap to do phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials on a medication just to get a piece of paper saying that it's approved. Now, the FDA isn't always pristine in their actions. I remember a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, we used to have a drug that had been around forever. Well, we still have the drug, but it's called colchicine, and we used it for gout. Very effective both for prevention of gout and acute gout flare-ups. So the FDA, through their wisdom, decided that they would invoke their unapproved drug initiative program about 15 or so years ago, 16 years ago, and they gave this drug company exclusive rights to sell this centuries-old drug in the U.S. with no competition. And the price went from 24 cents a pill up to $4 or $5 a pill. And then when that 3 years was up, the drug company, Takeda Pharmaceutical, was the one who marketed it to me back years ago. Then they had the right to set the price point, even for the authorized generics, till like 2029. Who did that benefit? The study that they did that proved it was safe and effective was a 1-week trial with less than 200 patients. And we've got medications, and I'm not going to mention them, but doctors have been doing trials on them for months and months with over 20,000 subjects. And the FDA is turning a blind eye? I just don't get it. I pointed out in a previous video that I did that the safety margin on that drug, which is not approved, is many, many times the usual dose. Now, I'm not recommending people get horse ointment or cream, but this unapproved medication, which is considered a World Health Organization essential drug, they do say, well, you can get nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, but what dose? Colchicine that I've been talking about, that a 1-week study worth hundreds of millions of dollars showed that it was safe and effective. If you take 2 pills, or maybe 3, you're going to have diarrhea. You're going to have a side effect. You're going to have nausea. The dose is 1 a day of colchicine. You can take an extra if you have a flare-up of your gout. Oh, and you can also use it for pericarditis. It's a common off-label use. So that stunt that the FDA pulled cost the Medicare and Medicaid an estimated $340 million up through 2017, based on the drug companies jacking the price up. Who did that benefit? Where is your don't do any harm? You got a patient doing well with a medication, the FDA decides by the stroke of a pen that they can't take their medicine anymore if they hadn't got insurance to afford it because it costs too much. So we got Merck, who made a lot of money off of ivermectin. I'll say it. They did give a lot away. I give them kudos for that, for the treatment of river blindness and elephantiasis in Africa. Great. I really think that was a wonderful thing to do. But now that they've got a couple of billion-dollar drugs in the pipeline, they no longer want to support study or use of ivermectin for anything other than its approved uses. Of course, speaking of approved uses, the CDC, which is another arm of our federal government, instructs doctors on their websites on how to use that drug for scabies, which is a off-label use. So one arm of the government is saying you can't use it other than what's approved. Another arm of the government is saying you can use it for what it's not approved. In my experience, doctors want to do what's best for the patient. Every treatment we do has a risk, a benefit, and the doctor, by understanding the disease, understanding the medication, understanding the patient, are able to make a decision jointly with the patient, I might add, on what's the best and most appropriate treatment and most cost-effective treatment. So the World Health Organization, in their wisdom, doesn't think certain treatments should be used for COVID because they haven't been proven safe and effective. Well, the World Health Organization, back in January of this year, said that the international travel to China should not be interfered with or curtailed. At the same time, Trump was trying to stop it. So why did they do that? They and others allowed the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the cause of COVID-19 infection, to spread from Wuhan. We supposed to listen to them? So yesterday, another report comes out from the CDC and the monthly morbidity and mortality report. And it's a continuation of the data from the Heroes-Recover cohorts study. They're following, 4,000 frontline healthcare workers, medical people, I think EMTs, maybe others. They're tracking to see about the effectiveness of the coronavirus vaccines. Initially, the vaccines were reported to be greater than 90% effective in preventing symptomatic and asymptomatic disease. And then they followed it along with weekly PCR testing and have found that in the post-Delta era, meaning since Delta has been greater than 50% of the reported viral types circulating, that now we're down by a third, around 66% effective. And it could be lower, we don't know. So now we have a vaccine that's only 66% effective. As a doctor, we just want to do what's best for the patient, and we weigh what's safe and what's not safe. If you knew how dangerous some over-the-counter medications were, if you knew how often medications are used for other than the approved use, and the FDA doesn't scream about it, the medical societies don't scream about it, the news media who have an agenda don't scream about it. But unless there's money to be made, and speaking of money, the NPR, National Public Radio, reported a few years ago how around a quarter of the people, when they leave their work at the FDA, go to work for Big Pharma. So when they work for the FDA, they're making a modest income. And then they leave and go work for the people that they've been regulating. And now they're making big bucks. And, I just don't know what to say. Since the days of modern medicine, and even before, doctors have always experimented. They've done what they could to try to help their patients. And now a government agency whose their job is to get more power, get more funding, have more control over other people's lives. I'm sure there's some people who are good-hearted, some people who mean well, but that's just the nature of a bureaucratic government agency. I'm going to keep encouraging people to get vaccines, to get vaccinated for COVID. I've been vaccinated. I'll probably take a booster. I think they're useful. But I think the powers that be are downplaying the effectiveness of natural immunity. This Heroes Recovery cohort study, I looked at the information of the study. When they were doing it, when they designed the study, they excluded people who had already had coronavirus. Now, wouldn't it have been good? Wouldn't it have been great if they had followed people who had coronavirus to see how long their original immunity lasted and how beneficial natural immunity is? I think pretty much all the studies for vaccines have excluded people with previous antibodies. They don't want to know how good natural immunity is in preventing additional COVID infections. And I know it's not 100%. I've got a couple of patients right now who are just getting over their second round of COVID after having COVID 8-10 months ago. Neither one of them are having a great time. Neither one are requiring hospitalization, but they're not just having a mild runny nose. I know of patients who've had the coronavirus vaccines in the last 3 or 4 months. And now they've got a positive COVID, mild symptoms, but they're still sick again. So nothing's perfect. Nothing's completely without risk. But we have to just look at the picture, the big picture. And the cost of medications, I think those have to be factored in. And going back to the FDA, a year ago, I believe it was August 23rd of 2020, the head of the FDA trumpeted the usefulness of convalescent serum for treatment of SARS-CoV-2, COVID infections. And then within 2 days, they had to retract it for the misinformation, the incorrect data that they provided, because they weren't as effective as what the FDA commissioner or leader, whoever it was, said. And now within the past few weeks, the acting head of the FDA is being criticized for rushing through the approval of a new Alzheimer's drug that is going to cost $56,000 a year for Alzheimer's. And many have said, hey, wait a minute, this is not as good as what you say it is. But $56,000 a year per person, that speaks pretty loudly. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, whether it'll be retracted. I did see where certain health systems are going to refuse to use it. everybody wants what's best for their patients. Everybody wants what's best for their family and their friends. We all need to work together instead of downplaying things, whether it's vitamins, supplements, medications, hydrotherapy. I don't know, whatever. Well, I think that's all I have to say. Take care. Be well.